Trials of Mana.
The story of Trials of Mana. It's honestly pretty simplistic. A goddess fights an evil power with a sword and seals that evil away. The battle leaves her pretty tired and she goes to sleep for a long time in a tree. Evil forces surface who want to use that power for nefarious deeds. Yeah, stop me if you've heard this before. In that story, you probably hear a lot of similarities with other RPGs, and while the premise does sound familiar, the way they decide to tell that story is pretty unique if you've not already played a branching storyline type of game like Octopath Traveler. Several branching storylines intertwine to become a relatively cohesive and decently woven narrative. Where it differs a bit is the fact that the opening story and some of the cutscenes later in the game differ when you play with a different main character. These subtle differences are where the game gets 99% of its replay value. I personally am on the 4th playthrough and have honestly yet to get tired of the story or the characters in it. Speaking of characters, there's not a single character in this game that I did not eventually enjoy. I say eventually because one character in particular has a speech impediment. This impediment bothers me for several reasons. I'm speaking of course of Charlotte, but we'll just boil it down to my personal pet peeves and leave it there. Contrasting my least favorite character, let's talk about my favorite character, Angela. It's funny, based on my previous statement, that Angela would be considered my favorite character, especially considering the fact that she also oozes a certain immaturity. But yeah, hear me out here. She, in my opinion, experiences the most flat-out growth of any character in the game. Though she's bratty and pretty much stays that way throughout the game, her character development in the post-game specifically made me really root for her to become the better person she was striving for, and eventually became. The only other storyline that I've played through completely is Reese. The pure-hearted, steadfast type of characters tend to have a very limited appeal to me, because they have the tendency to be kind of one-note and bland, which honestly is why I don't like Superman very much. Yeah, I know, haterade. Anyway, while Reese doesn't manage to stay away from a lot of those tropes that make those types of characters boring to me, she did manage to stay interesting enough for me to get through the entire story and not get terribly bored. The character whose playthrough I'm on currently is Hawkeye. I like Hawkeye because he is a stealthy ninja type of character, which really speaks to me on a personal level. I have always been some form of stealthy fighter in just about any game that I have ever played, so long as they have that type of character. In spite of his dark circumstances, he keeps a relatively upbeat and positive spin on things, which is where I try to stay, at least, mentally. All things considered, the way they develop characters and their personalities with their dialogue was something that really made this game worthwhile for me, and it's what kept me coming back for the next playthrough. The design of this game is delightful. It is bright and colorful, and all the environments manage to feel unique in spite of some of them using a few assets more than once. The animations are fluid and expressive throughout the game, whether we're talking about the main characters, the NPCs, the monsters, or sometimes even the environments themselves. They tend to stay crisp and refreshing. The UI of this game is a bit of a letdown in my opinion, mostly because some of the things you can do in the menu are not clearly defined while others are. For instance, it outlines all of the button configurations as you are moving through the pause menu, but even after they mentioned how to change your abilities, at least for me, it took several hours for me to get used to the concept. Also, some things that I thought would be useful in battle, like switching some bits of your configuration and selecting spells for battle, were not very intuitive for me for basically half of the game. Graphically speaking, this game is no powerhouse, but the textures manage to be relatively smooth and well rendered. Sometimes I notice a little bit of fuzziness depending on how busy the battle gets, how many particle effects are in effect, and whatnot, but yeah, overall, not bad at all. The battle system for this game, at least to me, in a way is the secret gem of the whole experience. As many well-made RPGs tend to achieve, there's a surprising amount of depth underneath the basic premise of, swinging your staff, spear, sword, or rod frantically at your opponents. Each monster has a weakness and strengths that you can take advantage of, and can use your skill trees to learn the proper elemental attacks to counter them. You can choose a path for your character that emphasizes different aspects of their attributes, like buffing your companions, debuffing your enemies, summoning, healing, a lot of the standard RPG stuff. Your companions act independently of your whims unless you spend the time figuring out just the right strategy for your characters to complement your own fighting style. That stated, a lot of that depth and strategy is only discovered if you opt for the higher difficulties, as I often do, to find that depth in question. Overall, this game is not without its flaws in every aspect I mentioned here. There are more glaring issues for me in the way the UI is explained, but there's no such thing as a perfect game after all. As far as experiences go, I was and am constantly engaged in the story, awed by the beauty of the world, enchanted by the characters, and hungry for that one more battle. The game is a delight, and if you happen to have an itch for a fun RPG, Trials of Mana will more than suffice. Thank you everyone for sticking around for the whole video. I am Jeff the Christian Gamer. If you'd like to like and or subscribe, you may do that by clicking on the links provided. Also, if you'd like to check out other videos I've done, you may do that by clicking on the links in this video. I do have a Facebook and a Twitter, both geared towards making sure you guys know when I release new content. Also, I have a Ko-fi page if you'd like to donate to the cause of me becoming a full-time YouTuber. So thank you guys, check those out, and I'll catch you again next time.